Member Kane.
Here.
Member Crowley. Member Elmer.
Are absent.
Member Sturznik Dean.
Here.
Member Maines. Vice Chair Winika.
Here.
Chair Lantis.
Here. All right, public comments. Persons who wish to address the City Planning Commission regarding items on the agenda may do so as that agenda item is called. Persons who wish to address the City Planning Commission regarding items not on the agenda and that are under the jurisdiction of the City Planning Commission may do so at the time or when called upon by the chair. Comments on personnel matters and matters pending in court or with other outside tribunals are not permitted. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Any public comments entered via online chat will not be recognized or commented upon. Any presentation is for informational purposes only. The Planning Commission will take comments under advisement. Declaration. At this time, I would like to ask the Planning Commission members to make a declaration of any conflict of interest or of any ex parte or outside communication that might influence their ability to hear all sides on any item on the agenda so that they might come to a fair decision. Consent agenda. Number 1, minutes. A, consider the July 7th meeting minutes for approval.
I so move.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Item B, consider the July 12th meeting minutes for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Kane, Commissioner Winika. All in favor say aye.
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 Public hearings, item number 1, the 2024 to 2028 Capital Improvements Program. We'll open the public hearing and ask staff for a presentation.
Thank you. This evening, we have for you the 2024 to 2028 CIP program, as you said, and we have discussed this briefly at your study session and talked through just the basics of the CIP and how it was structured differently this year than maybe it has been in the past years. But I think it's important to remind you or anyone who would be watching this now or later that the CIP is intended to outline the capital projects that have and a potential funding source identified. It has been mostly vetted by staff and is a project that we see moving forward without the need for, say, a referendum of the public or those kinds of items. And there are lots of projects that are still on our list that are included in the CIP document that you'll find that we've considered as future projects. They don't exist on the current 5-year plan because they're pieces to those projects that haven't been conducted yet. For example, a referendum for a public pool or any of those items that might be a new facility that would have an outside action that would need to happen before we can consider that being a project in our CIP or funded. And so the way that we structure this for you is you'll see it might look a little later than it did in the past years, where before it was, these are all the things we know that are sitting out there. This year's is more, our approach was provide to you a listing of those projects that we know are in the plan. They are in our financial forecast. We do know what the funding source might look like, and we've taken into consideration the impact on either an existing budget, long-term debt, or an outside source, funding source, like say a grant, either from the FAA or KDOT or any other source of funding that might be available. So keep that in mind as we move through the projects. I do want to start though by explaining a little bit about your purpose as the Planning Commission in the process of the CIP, and that is to listen to your public through a public hearing process if they have any concerns or want to have any additions made to the plan itself, and then to also consider whether or not the planned projects are in conformity with the comprehensive plan. Early in the year we talked about, or late last year we talked about the need to review the comprehensive plan annually. We have not yet had a chance to do that this year, so what we provided for you was a summary, and in the document that you have, the summary is immediately behind the memo that was provided, and it explains how these projects are they're either consistent with or inconsistent with the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan. In some cases, they're not either. They're not consistent or inconsistent because they're not directly related to an objective or a goal of the comprehensive plan, but they are a capital project. So maybe we're not adding to, maybe we're doing, it's more of a maintenance project or some sort of project that doesn't necessarily impact or wouldn't be recognized by your comprehensive plan. So we've tried to note that as well. For example, the airport, the OMA, the cemetery, some of those, we consider them to be consistent, but really there's not a direct correlation to certain areas within the comprehensive plan that might have dictated that these projects would be in compliance or not. So I might just run through those sections or by project category, if you don't mind, and then we can look at them individually if you like. We've provided for you some pictures and just a brief summary of each of them. I believe that was also in your packet, so if you've had a chance to review before this evening, you've already seen it. And I don't believe we probably need to take too much time on each one unless you have questions.
I don't need to go through the categories.
May I make a suggestion?
Sure.
We've already gone through this, so unless the other two commissioners want you to go through these categories, we have gone through these categories
Okay.
before, yeah.
Okay.
And if there are any members, there are no members of the public logged in, but
Right.
I think we can skip going through the categories.
I would be fine with that, as long as you're fine with that. That would be okay.
Commissioner Storesnik Dean, are you okay with that?
I am fine, unless there's something particular that we feel like needs to be highlighted or that has changed. I'm fine with moving forward.
I don't know that there's anything really new in the CIP that you might have not already seen or heard about, or made a suggestion that be added last year. I might note that there were a couple of projects. We do put out a request to the public to ask for recommendations for projects, and we did have a couple of suggestions. I do have those here real quick. One of them was, okay, I'm so sorry. Oh, now I went too far. One of them was a sidewalk repair, which was already in our plan to complete this year, so we were able to let that resident know that that was already going to be taken care of. The other was an additional bike and pedestrian bridge that would have connected across the river at a different point. And when we took this back to Public Works and tried to move through the process of what that might look like, one is cost prohibitive, but also there weren't any good points where we might be able to do that easily and would make sense from a pedestrian or bike standpoint, and that because we already have the existing bridge and it's near the trails, it's near the where it can be used, that we would focus more of our attention on making sure that we have, through our sidewalk program, having connecting links in places where people can get to and from those areas where it's easy to cross the river and or to other areas within town. So we did not propose this as being a project that would be included in the CIP at this time.
That would be very cost prohibitive by the time you got through all of the federal
Yes,
stuff.
yes,
Don't
yes.
see an area where it would make sense to put one.
So if we're gonna sort of skim over that, then do we need to, does anybody have any questions?
I do.
Okay, I knew you would, so that's why I asked.
The Carnegie building. That's city property.
That's
right?
city
It is.
And I've been in that basement. You know, at some point in the future, you know, it's gonna need some attention.
That's a good point. That is not something that was on our radar or part of our discussion this year.
Okay. And next year.
Might be something that we look at, just the Carnegie building, because the lighting in it is very old and outdated, and I would think not very energy efficient. It's got the old fluorescent
Yep.
fixtures with the ballast in it, and they don't give out a lot of light, and I'm sure they're not very energy efficient. So those are two things, and at least the lights, yes, it's gonna cost some, but in the
Yeah.
overall scope of things, not very much. The basement may be a different concern.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, but we
yes.
still need to preserve that building because it is on the register.
Mhm.
So, Just for explanation for me, you have two of these little graphs in the back that talk about funding. The first, or not graphs, but charts. The first one, when I look at the airport, it says reconstruct the taxiway, and it's got $1 million for 3 years in a row as budgeted, or as proposed, not budgeted, but proposed. Then the next funding source summary I look at, reconstruct taxiway, and it's got $100,000 in there. And then I see listed a little bit lower, FAA grants and KDOT grants. So are we saying that those are the amounts of the grants we'll get, or are we saying those should be the amounts that, should we get a 90-10 grant, that the city will be responsible for? Which?
Yes, okay, so thank you. That's a great question to explain this. So the first summary sheet is the total project cost. The rest of it is where the funding source would come from. So that exact example is a 90-10 split. So for $1 million project cost each year, we would be receiving $900,000 from the grant, and $100,000 would need to come from the airport fund.
Yeah.
When we presented the airport fund to the city commission for a budget overview, we made them aware that right now the airport fund doesn't actually support, and can't actually support $100,000 transfer every year for that project. But the the grant for that project, that and the KDOT grant, are both in a scenario where we need to use those funds soon for those projects. And so we then recommended that an additional transfer be made from the general fund to the airport fund, so those payments, those matching payments could be made. So it's a little bit of a shift in the back end for the funding source, but the match does come from the airport fund, which is a special revenue fund. It is supported by the general fund, which is a property tax fund.
And I only ask that because I'm familiar with that process, and I wanted to make sure, but I understood everything that was on that second page, so, okay.
Yeah, and I think it's a really great point, because I think a lot of people, I think we made this point last year, or you mentioned it last year, that people don't always understand that because it says it's a $3 million project, that doesn't mean that their property tax dollars are paying for a $3 million airport project
Right.
over the next 3 years. And I think that that funding source breakdown is a little bit better of an explanation that says this is where the dollars actually come from. The only changes we did make from our initial draft that we made and presented to the city commission to what you're seeing tonight is that through the process of budget, we presented to the city commission a budget that has less mill levies attached to it, which is also less property tax dollars that might come in based on the valuation increase. We were trying to find we would impact our residents less than if we use the full valuation increase. In order to do that, after you take into account the expenditures that already exist, maintaining your personnel, maintaining your operations, and the increases that come to us that we don't have any control over, we did not recommend any new projects or any new purchases beyond that. So no vehicle replacement, no new projects. So in our initial pitch to our city commission for the CIP, we included a couple of cemetery projects. Well, the cemetery fund or cemetery projects are funded by the general fund, which is property tax dollars. And we weren't going to be able to include those if we were with the budget that we presented. So we have moved those into an out year, because until or unless another funding source becomes available, they didn't fit into the new priorities under the general fund budget. So I think that's just notable to say that every one of these projects is it's not given that it's going to happen in the year that it's proposed. And if we were to earn a grant or be able to find some source of funding that we weren't already aware of, we might be able to accomplish those projects. But for now, we try to make it the most reasonable plan that we can based on the information we have today.
Other questions?
I have a question, and I don't know if this is the appropriate place to ask it, but with sidewalks, I know sidewalks are a huge ongoing project because the bigger the town gets, the more sidewalks we have. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering, perhaps for future consideration, we look at extending the sidewalks along 7th Street to get us all the way to the Flint Hills Trail on the east side, because I see so many people walking in the road to get there.
7th too. And
Yeah.
even
Seventh-
biking traffic as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's just a ditch right along the side, and
Yeah.
and it's a narrow road. But as we get more and more trail use at the museum, we see more and more trail users with tourism, bringing people in to ride the trails. Obviously, it's not going to be on here for this time around, but perhaps something to add for future consideration.
Great point.
Yeah.
And that was along, I'm sorry, 7th Street and,
7th going
Just
towards the
along-
Flint Hills.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, 7th Street East towards the Flint Hills Trail.
okay.
and that'll be nice for, when you ride your bike, then you've got a way of coming down towards the, yeah, that'll be nice.
And I see no members of the public that wish to speak unless we have somebody from the news media here that, and I don't think so. So with that, do we have everything that we need covered in the public hearing?
I believe you do.
All right, with that, I'll close the public hearing and commissioner discussion. What's your pleasure, commissioners?
I'd like to thank the staff for visiting the parking lot and, the tractor parking lot. And yes, I mean, we are trending in the right direction as we seek to beautify the entrance to the city. And I think that's going to help certainly with the drainage. It's going to just make it look nicer. So thank you so much for doing that.
And I think this particular item, this ends with us, right? We're saying it, all we're doing is making a statement that we've looked at it and it agrees with the comprehensive.
You'll need to make a motion, consider approval that it is in conformity with the
But we don't
comprehensive plan.
we're not recommending something to the city. We're just, our motion is our motion, not something that we're recommending to the city for their approval.
Right, once you find it in compliance with the comprehensive plan, then we'll take it back to the city commission and they'll consider approval of the CIP at the same time that they consider the budget
Okay.
for next year.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve the 2024-2028 capital improvement plan as being in conformity with the Ottawa Comprehensive Plan.
I'll second.
Commissioner Stareski Dean, I think we'll give her the opportunity to be in our minutes today. So, since she made a attempt to be with us today. All right, would you call for the roll, please?
Member Kane?
Yes.
Member Stresnick Dean?
Yes.
Member Elmer? Member Maines? Member Crowley? Vice Chair Winika?
Yes?
And Chair Lantis?
Yes. All right, moving on. Do we have any new business?
None.
I have a question on, and we can address this in a planning or in a study session. But the public comments, this new paragraph that's been added up here. While we are a public meeting, the only time, my understanding in the past has been, the only time the public speaks is when we have a public hearing. And the way this is worded, they can come to the microphone and speak on every item that we have. And is that a new policy of the city commission that they passed on to the planning commission, or is that, what's the purpose of that? Because it's not the way, it's a different way of doing business for us.
Okay, it's a great question. I will get some clarification for you and we can talk about it at the study session.
Yes,
That's
please
okay.
do. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. All right, anything else to come before the commission?
I understand a new planner will be joining the team soon. Have you?
Nope.
Have the city made an
Nope.
offer to anybody yet?
No, not for the planner position. We do have a new director who will be joining us at the end of the month. And we are working with a consulting company for the planning services for now.
Okay.
And continue to have open positions, so if we have applicants that are interested.
The consulting did not work really well the last time we did that.
Sure.
So I would suggest that maybe you, and you're aware of some of the issues, but I would suggest maybe you visit with some of the other people involved and find out what the issues were, because we did have issues the last time.
We did. The firm that we're looking at right now would offer some on-site services.
Ooh.
Good.
They do believe in face-to-face contact with our public and the developers that need their questions answered, as well as being available to the planning
Good.
commission.
Good.
Good. Because even when they needed to be at one of our meetings, if they did it by Zoom, we spent a lot of time waiting for their comments to unfreeze. So, all right,
Yes.
very good.
Yes.
We'll take a motion to adjourn.
You do not. You haven't done announcements yet.
Oh, I'm sorry, I haven't done announcements yet. The next regularly scheduled planning commission special meeting?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Regular.
That's okay.
Regular
The next
meeting.
regularly scheduled planning commission study session
Sorry.
will be Thursday, August the 31st, and the next regularly scheduled planning commission meeting will be September 13th at 7 p.m. Now, how about a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
There's a motion by Commissioner.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Wanika. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.